No. Excellent. So I'm going to say good morning to everyone as you're coming in, and I'm always told to be really patient to wait for everyone to join the webinar. So this morning, Jason is going to be talking to us about his insight into the funeral profession, but actually we just wanted to pose you a question with our slightly psychotic cat. And ask you, as you are joining us this morning, and good morning to everyone who's saying good morning, what interactions have you had with funeral directors? So I wondered if you would be willing to share that in the chat box so that everyone can see, just while we're waiting for everyone to join us this morning. So yeah, please feel free to share your experiences. Just be interesting to see what interactions you've already had with funeral directors. And during this morning's session, Jason will be talking you through a bit of background about the funeral profession, but also sharing some ideas of how maybe you can interact with funeral directors as a charity.
That's quite an open question. Funeral directors historically used to marry old, rich widows. So I don't know if we've got any old, rich widows in the chat, but
don't answer that.
Their experience might be quite different to other people's.
Yeah, there's a few bits and pieces. Let's have a look. So yeah, morning Charlotte, Julie, Alison. So looking to develop relationships, receipt of in-memory donations, thanking them, liaising with them regarding a tribute fund, receiving in-memory donations through the post. I wonder if actually you're still receiving lots of in-memory donations through the post. That might be quite interesting to know. Thanking them, setting up MuchLoved pages, sent Christmas cards, attending funeral memorial service to represent the charity.
I think somebody did say that they're not receiving as many donations as they used to pre-COVID. So I guess that's probably the case for everyone, I would imagine.
Struggle to get others engaged, especially those who are part of Dignity. That's a question for you, Jason. Not a huge amount of interaction, but want to change. Been to the funeral exhibition. That is
wow, they know how to live.
We're lucky.
Definitely a day to remember.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, that's good. So a couple of funeral directors sponsored part of the Light Up a Life. So they've got a very good relationship. That's a great idea.
And it's good as well, the people that are popping in face to face, if you can pop in to see your local funeral director. So I'll give you an example of what I did when I was at stroke a bit later, but that is a good idea to actually see them and hear how they need to interact with you as a charity.
So it's interesting to see Irene's going to go again, and you should buddy up with Karen, or Karen, you should buddy up with Irene to go to the NFE.
Blimey, we've got so many responses. I can't keep track of them all. Are you two having a look as well? I hope so.
Yeah. So
it's I mean, generally there's a great interest for wanting to develop more relationships. Dignity are the hardest ones. I guess that's probably because the people that you're liaising with are not business owners, they're employees. So maybe they have they have sort of different ideas about maybe or different importance for sort of working with local organisations. Okay, I'll tell you what, Jason, shall we, what time is it now? I think probably most people have joined us. So do you want to kick off? And Jackie and I will have a sort of scroll through the messages as people are kindly sharing, and maybe we can kind of pick up on some of those comments in the session.
Absolutely. Okie dokie. So a tiny bit about me. So I used to be a real life funeral director for just over 12 years. And I started out with a corporate in the provinces and small towns, actually in the kind of Kent, Catford area. And then latterly worked for a family-owned independent, and that was in Chelsea in southwest London. And I'm currently the area secretary for 2 area federations of the National Association of Funeral Directors. And I also hold a diploma in funeral celebrancy and have an interest in ceremony and people's lives, that kind of thing. So being a bit of a journalist about people who've died. So I've got this slide here because I don't want to be too wordy, but this is pulling back lots of memories from my time funeral directing, and the reason why using MuchLoved was a really good thing for us as an organization. So still quite a few funerals take place in churches, probably more so now post or towards current kind of lockdown years. Funeral directors want funeral services to take place in churches because the exposure is really, really good. However, it adds complications like retiring collections, which are a real pain from an administrative point of view, because each donation that we used to receive, we would add to our system. So we used to use a piece of software called Funeral Manager, and then we would send a letter to each of the donors, and then we would have a protocol in place to send a letter to our client 6 to 8 weeks after the funeral. So each of those donations incurred, we had to put a stamp on the envelope, we had to buy an envelope and print the letter. So it was actually quite costly and also in time. This lady here giving a donation reminds me of quite often we get people coming into our offices with a £5 donation for a funeral that took place a few months ago, which is great. Funeral directors want to interact with people. They want people going into their offices, and not many people really want to go into a funeral director's office. So having that interaction was great. However, the donation aspect of it was really tricky for us. So using MuchLoved kind of took away that administrative aspect. And I almost forgot to mention collection envelopes. So funeral directors are really good at saying yes to stuff. Collection envelopes from a logistical point of view. So if you're the person out conducting the funeral, every funeral venue you go to is time sensitive. So you can only really get to a crematorium about 8 minutes before your allocated time, and you have to be out of the chapel before the end of your time. Otherwise, you would get a fine in some at some crematoria. And then the same if you're late to the burial afterwards. If you're going to church first, you can get fined by the cemetery. So collection envelopes are a logistical nightmare for us because we have to put them out on the pews. And then what about pens? People don't carry pens with them if they want to complete the gift aid declaration on the back. So people would then get a bit kind of moany at us because we hadn't provided them with pens, and then you'd have the chapel attendant moaning at you because people were taking too long to complete the collection envelope. So collection envelopes are really scary. If there's ever an issue with the amount that's been popped in there, so any accusations that are made against funeral people, the funeral directors aren't really supported, so they're a bit scared of collection envelopes. That's kind of not a great way to foster a relationship, really, is going down the collection envelope route. Anyway, I'll stop banging on about collection envelopes, but I feel like I'm representing the entire profession by saying that. So this is an alternative. So funeral directors who kind of don't want to be involved in handling donations may opt for this. And this is a carton with a hole in the top, and people pop their donations in, and the funeral director gives it to the family, back to the client at the end of the funeral. So there's no touching of the donations. And obviously that's not great for you from a gift aid point of view, from collecting donor information. So these do exist, and they kind of represent the fact that funeral directors just don't want to get that involved with them.
Yeah, and I think a few people are saying that they're receiving more kind of donations via families rather than the funeral directors. So this is obviously more common, but I think people tend to be more generous when they're giving donations online or via their card, because we don't carry so much cash anymore, do we?
Yeah, people don't. I don't carry cash.
I do wonder if there might be a little bit of an opportunity with those collections, though, that if you know the funeral and the deceased family were collecting on behalf of a charity, if you had those sort of a supply of those that you could give to your local funeral director, mainly, I guess it would be the independents, where they could use them at that particular funeral. I don't know how easy it'd be able to coordinate, but if you've got a relationship with your local independent ones, that might be an opportunity.
Yeah, that's an idea actually. I know the lady who creates these, so I can connect anyone that wants to be connected with her. So this is a couple of photos from funeral directors near me in Dorset, and funeral directors historically, and they still do near me, display their upcoming funerals on a notice board outside of their office window. You'll quite often see a clock in an office window as a way of getting people to look in. So I hope it's not kind of cruel game with time, but that kind of getting people to be familiar with the funeral directors. So the reason I'm mentioning this is because actually funeral directors can do this if they want to, but they can also display their upcoming funerals and their recent funerals on their website. And here's a really nice example. So this funeral director calls them obituaries, and they're pulling across data from MuchLoved. So the really good thing about funeral directors displaying upcoming funerals is that they're adding fresh content without going to much effort. So we give them a coding that enables them to do that. And people can then go to this page and make a donation. So you can see here for peace funerals, you can go straight to, you've got the service details. So a lot of phone calls that we would get as funeral people was, what's the postcode for the crematorium? And you used to learn all of them, but actually you could tell them what the postcode was, and you could actually say, go to our website, and the service details are there, and you can print off a map. And they can view the tribute, so they can interact with the tribute, and they can make a donation this way as well. So funeral directors can also, and this might be a thing for you to mention to them actually, funeral directors can also signpost people to either the tribute page or to this section on their website on the back of a printed order of service. So it might be that actually a tribute has been created through your scheme, and so the funeral director isn't involved, and you could ask the supporter to include the URL on the back of the printed order of service sheet, or a QR code. So there's that option as well. So in addition to the pages being a valuable long-term bereavement tool, funeral directors also offer grief chat through MuchLoved. So they have access to this chat box functionality that sits on a bereavement support page on their website. So this is a really good thing for them, because their driver bearers can tell their mates at the pub about grief chat. So a lot of people who use grief chat are male, and I think probably because it's anonymous. So funeral directors have this functionality with their partnership with MuchLoved too. So this, to recap really, the last couple of points I haven't mentioned, but funeral directors believe that potential clients are more confident and likely to appoint them when they see that other people have. So them displaying their upcoming funerals is beneficial for them from that point of view. And there's an increasing amount of unattended funerals. So there are companies out there who will arrange for the person who's died to be collected and cremated, probably out of area, without anyone attending the funeral. So there's no ceremony. So they add value to those types of funerals by offering them a tribute page where people can go and share memories. So kind of a step towards a substitute for having an actual service for them. Okay, so the types of funeral director businesses. So you've got your corporate. So I started off with a corporate, which has now been bought out by Dignity and Funeral Partners Limited. But the big corporate organizations are the National Co-op, followed by Dignity, and then Funeral Partners. And quite often they will keep the name of the business. So they will have their bit of branding, and actually they're being forced now to say that they are actually corporately owned In addition to national co-op, you've also got regional co-ops like Tamworth Co-op, and there are many others, and they're not part of national co-ops. It's a bit confusing, but you've got regional, smaller cooperatives out there as well. And then you've got your independents. So independents can still be really big. So I know of an independent, and they've got just under 50 offices, but they're still family owned. But you can there are loads of independent funeral directors out there with just one office. And I put here, most independents are family owned and are made up of small teams. And they're a really passionate bunch. Well, most people are really passionate about it, but independents believe that they can support families the way that they want to. The sector as a whole, so it has been completely unregulated. So any of us here can call ourselves a funeral director and use a garage at the side of our house, or to kind of lock up if we wanted to. But it began its journey into regulation last year. So the Competition and Markets Authority have started to implement regulation, and that regulation looks a bit like having a standardized price list, a bit like when you see an NHS dentist's price list. The structure of it is the same, so that people can compare costs. Funeral directors now have to declare their financial interests, including any charitable donations over £250. So they can't bribe people anymore, that's illegal, but that's worth bearing in mind when it comes to you seeking sponsorship opportunities from your funeral directors. If you ask them for £249, that's a really easy figure for them, because they don't have to adjust their website or any of the literature that they have to legally display in their office window and inside their building. So £249 is a really easy figure for you to ask for. They have to display their terms of business, so whether they're owned by a corporate or that kind of thing, any payment terms, so when clients have to pay the money. There's no obligation for them to be a member of a trade body such as the National Association of Funeral Directors, the NAFT, which is the largest one. So the NAFT, you've got corporates that operate within that. And then the alternative really is the National Society of Allied and Independent Funeral Directors, SAFE, and they're the home for smaller independent funeral directors. And I put here, it's made up of mostly amazing people who care deeply about bereavement journeys. And I put, remember, the funeral professionals deserve to make a decent living, like fundraisers too. And that kind of blurs into the fact that community fundraisers are an integral part of the community, as integral as the funeral directors, the funeral people that operate in the same area. But there's kind of lots of opportunity for relationship there. So this is a bit of an opportunity for us to look at the questions, perhaps. But there's some photos here of me being handed keys and at the local meetings that I've organised here. But I don't know, Sally, are there any questions that we need to have a nosy at?
Lots of people would like the details of the lady, the person that supplies the boxes. Then there's been lots of chatter about the issues with donations coming through Dignity. I think somebody has very kindly posted what they do, so I think that's useful to everyone else, so thank you for doing that. Alison has got a funeral director networking session this evening, so that's interesting. Yeah, and I think generally was kind of sharing experiences, but I don't think there's any specific questions. Oh, who's the best person to make initial contact with, and how would you suggest we start to approach funeral directors?
I think that's a really good question. It's worth remembering that the person who sat in front of the family is the funeral arranger. The funeral arranger may not be the key decision maker, though the business owner, who's quite often the funeral director, is. But I think your funeral arranger is the most kind of precious person to interact with. But I think asking them what they want and what works for them. So we used to get loads of stuff sent to us, and in our arranging rooms, this is an important point actually, in our arranging room, we never displayed any third-party literature whatsoever. So a lot of the stuff that charities would send to us, we would bin because we didn't want to provide collection envelopes, and we didn't want the space that we had to be filled with so many distractions. Some funeral directors will do, but we had kind of, it was a blank canvas really. I'd say target your funeral arrangers and develop relationships with them. Jumping back to the dignity bit, that's a bit of a tricky thing for us to do, so I'm not quite sure how helpful we can be with dignity.
Somebody is Christelle's asked, when funeral directors create tribute pages on MuchLoved, do you only contact them or the tribute guardian? So we MuchLoved don't contact them at all. The relationship is between the family and the funeral director, and the funeral director are encouraged by us to put the family's contact details on so that you can then contact them, thank them, and start to build up a relationship with them. Somebody asked about funeral directors sponsoring kind of in memory events. I don't think I know of any sort of personal experience of that, but I've certainly seen funeral directors sponsoring tribute fund schemes, and also kind of putting their name to dedication pages. So there's definitely opportunities there. So maybe there's people on the chat that have done that might be willing to speak to others. Yeah, Charlotte, it is a shame that dignity is just giving and not us. That's a very good point. Maybe that'll change in the future.
Actually, I know that we've got a hospice who have sponsorship for their tribute fund platform through a funeral director, so it's definitely an option. And actually inviting funeral arrangers, if you have any kind of in memory events, making sure that you invite your local funeral arrangers and making a fuss of them, I think that's really valuable. And even asking if they want to read at one of your, if you have a service, a memorial service, then inviting them to read would be a really good way of fostering a relationship with them.
Excellent. Somebody else has said that they've just returned from a local hotel who are partnering with them on a funeral director reception. They've never done one before. Any advice on the best day of the week, time and itinerary for the event? Lots of information required there.
Shall I go through this slide?
Yeah, go for it. Yeah, because this might answer some of the quite a lot of the questions that are coming through now, I think.
Okay, so I put here, prepare to be disappointed. It's hard work, but don't give up. So funeral directors are a tricky bunch to interact with. So in my role as area secretary, bearing in mind that they pay a subscription to be part of the trade association, it's really difficult to get them to engage with the valuable offering that we provide on a local area basis. But don't give up. The best time to interact with funeral directors is Tuesday mornings at around 10 AM. So statistically, that's the least popular option for people to have a funeral is Tuesday morning. So that's a good time when people tend to be about. Funeral people do think that your supporter journey is purely financial. So, but it's not. They're passing the baton to you. So the fact that the funeral arranger is passing the baton to you, and there's a valuable kind of supporter journey is something that you need to communicate. So tell funeral people what your supporter journey looks like. And I know that this is a project that the lovely Carol at Northwest Cancer Research has been working on, is telling their funeral directors what their supporter journey looks like. So things to think about, which I think are worth jumping up and down about, are things like, are you sending a handwritten thank you card when you receive a notification that a funeral notice has been created supporting you? That's a long sentence. So are you sending a handwritten thank you card? And are you sending a tangible gift? Are you sending someone a memory pin or a badge? So memory pins are actually becoming increasingly popular. So that's something that funeral directors now offer. So some printers are providing that, have added memory pins to their product range. So funeral directors will offer memory pins to the immediate family and their friends. They'll give out like a dozen or 15 memory pins. So that's something that's very much in the space. and state that you are aware that the next of kin might not be IT savvy, and that you will send them a written correspondence. So be aware so communicate that you're aware of what people's difficulties are if they're not IT savvy. And I've got here, tell the funny SIG legacy story, but it's not really that funny. But there was a legacy pledger who got invited to every top table dinner, and when he died, he didn't leave the charity anything. So he ate out on them for years and years. And actually, the people at your top table, I think, could be, and perhaps should be, funeral arrangers, because actually they're really ingrained in the community that you operate in. So invite them to stuff and make them feel really special. And I put here, invite funeral people to events, so educational events. Funeral people don't really get a huge amount of CPD, so any shared CPD, any opportunities, invite them to. And remember, there's value in the invitation, so even if people don't attend, then they've received the invitation. We used to invite loads of clergy to dinners, and not many of them would turn up, but there was value in the invitation. They would remember receiving the invitation in the post. Shindigs, most funeral people like a shindig, so if you've got any balls or stuff like that, ask funeral directors to sponsor, I know, the labels on the wine, that kind of stuff, because if they get a table of 10 out of it for their entire team, then that's a really easy bit of kind of looking after your staff kind of thing, and then them being involved with your work, with your fundraising. And I put here, don't forget to contact them for corporate sponsorship opportunities. So we used to have a budget, so we'd have I think a couple of £1,000 to spend every quarter on what we call community activity. And actually trying to spend that was quite tricky. So be aware that they do have budgets, and ask them if you can have that money in some way. So be creative with that. And I put here, they're as scared of you as you are of them. So, and funeral directors are terrified of being thought of as ambulance chasers. And there's a man there chasing an ambulance, which I thought was quite funny. So yeah, be bold, kind of be the first person to interact. And again, this is probably me banging on about self-importance, but there is an important part of your community as you are.
And Jason, we just had a question about CPD. Could you just explain what you meant by CDP?
CPD, so training opportunities. So most charities have got really clever marketing and comms people in their team. So your marketing and comms person could do a bit of a kind of session on teaching funeral people how to use social media. So there's that. If you've got any healthcare professionals who are talking about anything end of life or communication skills with bereaved people, any shared opportunities like that. And I'm thinking if you've got in-house counsellors, they could quite easily do a session on kind of active listening, that kind of thing. So I think you've got so many skills, even within your team, that you can invite, that you can share with funeral people. So I think that's quite a nice thing. So every time you've got CPD coming up, think about whether you could invite your local funeral arrangers to it.
There's another question. This is about sort of MuchLoved platform, so I'd like to address this. But so if a tribute fund is set up by a funeral director and they set the next of kin as the guardian, does the guardian get a notification if you need a candle or a gift on the fund? So it depends, actually. It depends how the notifications are set up. So if the fund holder has set it up to receive, so that notifications go straight onto the tribute, then they won't receive anything. But if they've set it up to receive a notification that new content is being added to their page, they will do. So it's different for every individual tribute, but I still think there is value putting a notification, contributing to a tribute page as the benefiting charity.
Yeah, and
also, what sort of training do MuchLoved give to our funeral partners? I'm sure that's continual, as Jason and Sally will.
Yeah, we've got, well, we have actually developed an e-learning platform, which actually we'll be able to share to our charity partners soon as well, because we're popping some courses on there for yourselves. So we provide our funeral directors with a range of training, some in person, some through webinars. We run similar webinars for our funeral industry relationships as well, and they also get training through our e-learning platform. So a mixture of different training facilities from us to our funeral director partners. Oh, this is lovely. So Kelly, who's a funeral director, so she's keen to meet local charities that she hasn't heard from before, and would love to attend educational events and build greater relationships.
It's like we paid her to say that.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you, Kelly. I'll let you carry on, Jason, while Jackie and I.
So these are Northwest Cancer Researchers seeds that they send out. And I just noticed there's a do not eat thing on the back, which made me chuckle. But they actually sent these to funeral directors as well, so that funeral directors could really see what they were sending to their supporters. And I'm thinking about increasing the likelihood of whatever you're sending being opened. So handwritten envelopes, perhaps using a blank franking mark will, because it's sometimes really easy to spot stuff from charities, and I've been guilty of throwing it straight in the bin. So if you can make it anonymous so that they open it, but having this sent to them is actually really nice. And when you send them something like this, ask them to post it on social media to say that that's what they've received and how touched they are. And you might need to handhold them with social media. But Carol, thank you for letting me use this image. So national versus local charities. And as I said before, funeral people really do want to build relationships with and support charities. So help facilitate this. Be an enabler, a help, a friendly person at the end of the phone, their go-to person, but don't add to their workload. And some of the things on here that I think Jackie's going to add to or embellish on.
Yeah.
Go on.
I was just looking at some of the questions as well. And Nikki Folks had an interesting one. So when I worked at the Stroke Association, again, it was cutting through the noise, and what would funeral directors display in their windows, in their rooms where they were dealing with their bereaved families. So I went and asked a cross section of, around our local area, so local independents, the national ones, just to see what it is, their go-to communications, what they used, what they didn't use. And it's a bit like they didn't want to be seen unless they were the charity of the year they were supporting, to really push one charity over another one. But one thing they did always say is, again, they don't have the leaflets, but they always have a box of tissues or tissue. So one of the projects we did when I was at Stroke is that we actually sent a branded box of tissues to the funeral director, just with our branding and just sitting there. So we did look at individual packs of tissues, but they were too expensive. But it's just cutting through the noise. So your branding can be there subtly without shouting, but it can be useful. The other thing they said was that their guide at that time, and this is pre-COVID, was funeral service times, where it used to be a directory, which I think one of the questions that's on the chat, where they used to, look at details of charities if they were ever asked by a family. They had like a listings, so it might be worth touching base to see if that publication is still as used as much. And also, when I did visit the funeral directors, everyone had it on their coffee table or their table. So then we would put paid advertorials in that magazine that the funeral directors read, that gave a bit of information about the charity. So that's another good way of cutting through some of the noise. So it's only a little bit I did with funeral directors, but that was the learnings at that point of time. Obviously, in this world now, I'm not sure how much is printed and everything, but it was definitely at that time a directory that they used, and the tissues I understand were received very well.
Yeah, I think the tissues idea is a really good one, because the one thing on your arranging room table that you could have is a box of tissues. So if you can get them for free from a charity, then that's great. I used to get really excited about certificates. So there was a military charity who used to ask us for a £50 donation, and then they would send us a certificate, and we used to pop that in our window. So finding stuff to go in windows is really tricky. So every quarter we try to change our window display, and I'll talk a bit about that later on.
Sorry, I'm just going to interrupt. So yes, somebody asked if we can save the chat. Yeah, I'll send that to everybody, because there's loads of people flinging email addresses around and sharing information. So absolutely, we'll share that. Sorry, Jason, I just wanted to also, there's been quite a lot of chatter about pin badges, and I thought it might be useful to tell you that MuchLoved have got a pin badge, or we did have, but we haven't got any in stock, but we're going to have some in a kind of 5 or 6 weeks or so, and they're just the MuchLoved logo, actually. So if any of our charity partners that are here this morning would like some to use as their own kind of in-memory pin badges, then we'd be very happy to share those. Another quick question about how the charity can tell if the funeral director is the owner of the tribute. Well, if you go into your partner area, and you can see in the section that says tributes fundraising for you, if you're an Optimum charity, if it's got no owner, then the tribute has been created by a funeral director. And if the email address of the owner is a company name, then that gives you a big clue. Gives you a big clue that, sorry, I'm in the office and they're putting messages through the window. It's very distracting. I'm better off at home, I think. Yeah, so yeah, you can tell if it's a company email address, then that will give you an idea that it's been created by a funeral director. Lots of pin badges requests, excellent. Maybe we should double the order.
Shall I carry on? I was going to say,
Yeah,
so national charities kind of empower your community fundraisers to engage with funeral directors, so that they build relationships on your behalf and rock up to events. I can remember organising some events and no one would turn up, but it did make me feel a bit better if there was someone from a charity turning up, and it was a nice opportunity to then develop a relationship with them. So rock up to stuff. And Jackie mentioned a few moments ago about funeral director publications, but I think it's important, rather than just putting an advert in there that people are going to flick past, is to talk about the why. So put yourself in the funeral director's shoes. So why would they want to suggest you? Perhaps because you're, I don't know, I would imagine that there are some funeral arrangers out there who have been supported by national charities. So you gaining kind of a bit of a case study from them, and perhaps they managed to keep working whilst they were being supported by you. So you were supporting them, they were supporting bereaved families. That would make an amazing story to go in one of the FT publications. Or maybe share an interesting person from within your, the story of an interesting person within your charity, that kind of thing. And the kind of typical funeral director publications. Jackie, you mentioned Funeral Service Times, which I'd completely forgotten about, but Funeral Service Times should be on here as well. So the Funeral Service Journal tends to be what kind of driver bearers read, because it's a lot about cars. So the Funeral Service Times would probably be a good alternative to this, to target funeral arrangers. But that's quite a sweeping statement. But Funeral Director Monthly is the magazine that the National Association of Funeral Directors publish every month. So all of the NAFD members will get this, and this is SAFE's alternative, SAFE's version. But remember that some funeral directors will be a member of both the NAFD and SAFE.
Jason, Karen's asked if they can sign up to these publications. So presumably they'll only get the NAFD or SAFE ones if you're a member. But I think you can probably purchase the others or subscribe to them.
Yeah, so I think you have to be a member to get the SAFE and the FD monthly one. But Funeral Service Journal and Funeral Service Times, you can go online and subscribe. So any funeral director can do that.
And if you do place an advertorial in any of these publications, you get the Bible, the once a year publication, and the monthly ones anyway, whether you've not put another advertorial on. So from my experience, I always have the publication land on my desk every month, whether we'd had a advertorial that month or not. So yeah, so you can get hold of them. I'm sure if you contact them directly, they'd be happy to send you a copy. But you can see it online as well. I'm sure they're online.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. Actually, if you're a national charity and you've got a CPD opportunity, I know that the NAFT Funeral Director Monthly would love to publish that. So there's a bit of free advertising opportunity for you there. I think anyway.
Oh. And Michelle's asked if the bigger funeral directors have newsletters they send around internally. I've only ever seen evidence of that on one funeral director, but I would have thought that the regional cooperatives and maybe organisations like Funeral Partners probably do. They should do anyway.
And then local charities, and I put here cross-pollination on social media. So if you're doing something with a funeral director, tag them, or if they're doing something with you, and help them to create a social media post. They do joined up stuff on social media, and I put here provide access to in-person and online CPD. So that's kind of going back to you've got a social media person in your team, kind of share their knowledge and then invite them to stuff. Host trade association meetings at your premises, but don't charge them for the space hire. So one of the things that I do is try to find venues for local area federation meetings. So if we were to use a charity space, it would be a great opportunity for the charity to talk about their work and what their supporter journey looks like. But definitely charge them for the food and the drink. But if you can offer them the venue for free, then that would definitely kind of win them over. It would me. So and as I mentioned before, invite local funeral arrangers to events, so everything, make sure that they get an invitation, and their families as well, because it's likely that they're really ingrained in your community. Go and say hi. Some might be frosty. I know that we've got a few funeral people on this call, but there are some funeral people who aren't as lovely as those on this call, but yeah, give it a go, build a relationship with them. And personal introduction, so funeral people love having a named contact, so I think there's value in that as well. So anything in memory, make sure that they know who they can speak to.
Rachel's just shared a really fantastic idea about a flower library that the local funeral directors have. So they loan flowers to families in exchange for donation to their charity. And but yeah, what a fantastic idea that is.
Yeah, that's a lovely idea.
I've never heard of that. That's brilliant.
Yeah.
That's great.
Brilliant. We're all learning on this morning, aren't we? It's really good.
So I mentioned earlier how excited I used to get about certificates. So Dementia UK have done this, and I've actually stolen these images with permission from the funeral director's social media channels. So when you send them a certificate, prompt them to post it on social media. We've got this Northwest Cancer Research certificate that was sent to Tom Owen and Son. So Tom Owen and Son are a really clever bunch, and they're super on social media. And so they've popped their certificate in a frame in their arranging room, I think, and they've shared this on social media. And more about kind of the cross-pollination bit is that this funeral director shared Dementia UK certificate. So if they do tag you in it, please kind of be all over them and interact on the post. That's, I think, really important. And more Tom Owen and Son examples here. So Tom Owen and Son have put this little video using Canva, I think, together. So it would be lovely if these charities then went and interacted with the post. So, but yeah, it's nice to see funeral directors being more kind of social media savvy. So this window displays. as I said, every quarter we try to change our window display. There's a company called Colourful Coffins who sell coffins, and they also sell foils to funeral directors, and foils work really well in office windows because they're not massively invasive. You just need a curtain rail thing. So structurally it's easy to do. So what you could do is you could perhaps liaise with someone like Colourful Coffins, and if you've got a week, a special week taking place, then you could perhaps speak with Colourful Coffins and then communicate to your funeral directors that you're doing this week, and in fact they can then make a donation for the voil to you so that they can then have a window display supporting you. So paying for material to go in your window is a really easy thing for funeral directors to do. So I think I'd jump at that actually. So there's this, which I think is good. So colourful.
Yeah, and I could envisage charities using that for like their sunflower walks or an event or something in the local community, especially with those independent funeral directors that do use the voil and change their windows. So I'm sure, I know we've got a very creative bunch with our charities here. I'm sure they can think of ways how they can get that foil with their branding on.
Some of the, am I right in saying that some of the multi-branches are a little bit competitive about their windows amongst their own branches? I think they get, I've definitely kind of heard them chattering about that when I've been in funeral directors.
Yeah, why don't you should do a competition, the best window display supporting your charity. That's a really good idea. Yeah, they are quite competitive.
Yeah.
That's a good idea. And here I've got the national presidents for NAFT and SAFE. They always have a charity of the year. So actually that charity of the year could have really good exposure. So try to foster relationships with the presidents because they'll kind of get you out there seen. And they're always after kind of guest speakers at conferences. So if you've got someone who's brave enough to go and stand in front of a bunch of funeral directors, then that would be another good opportunity. So what are your questions? And I think we've had loads. I've ignored the questions because it's a bit like a kaleidoscope of colour.
Yeah, it's difficult to chat and look at the questions.
Yeah.
I think we have, hopefully we've covered a lot of them. I will we'll delve into the chat box a little bit afterwards, so that actually if we can kind of offer any more sort of responses in depth after this, because I'm conscious that we're kind of coming to the end of time. I'll let everybody know when our pin badges are ready, because it's going to be a few weeks yet, I think. Somebody has said, oh, so many things. Somebody has said that hospitals don't like to advertise death, and I work for a hospital charity. Do you have any ideas to promote at a funeral director office from this perspective?
I mean, I think charities as well, just, you know, not just hospital charities, but charities in general, try and look more on a positive side and support families. So it is a tough one, you know, to have
like your box of tissues, Jackie. That's a really very sort of subtle way of kind of promoting the charity at the funeral director. So maybe that kind of idea would work.
Yeah, and if you've got bigger budgets than I had at the time, you know, like little individual packs of tissues that they handed out to families.
Going back to the hospital situation, so hospitals have got chaplaincy teams normally, and they've got a bereavement team, and they've got mortuary staff. So actually your relationship with funeral directors could be you facilitating a relationship between the chaplaincy team, the mortuary technicians, and the bereavement support team. So you kind of bridging that gap, or I don't know, holding some kind of social event where funeral people could go into the hospital and meet these people. I think there's value in that, because the working relationships that we'd have with our bereavement officer, for example, was really valuable to us, because you're on the phone to them every day. So facilitating that, I think, is a good thing with funeral directors. So there's an opportunity there, I think.
And also, don't most hospitals have a little booklet that they can give to families, and maybe, you know, you could see if your charity could, you know, you could put some information in that little booklet, because sometimes at the time of death it's a bit overwhelming for the families if they've got something tangible to take away with them. I'm sure most hospitals do have that booklet.
Yeah, so they could talk about tribute funds, they could talk about signposting to bereavement support, they could signpost to their own grief chat service that they get through MuchLoved, those kind of things. That's a really good idea.
Excellent, great. Well, there's lots of people saying they've never seen window displays.
Yeah,
but maybe we're not looking. Yeah, go look a little bit more in depth at your funeral directors. They often do have window displays in. Yeah, so thank you very much, Jason. Lots of really great, a really fantastic session, and we've had loads of really brilliant feedback from everyone that has attended. We will be in touch, so I'll make sure that a recording of this is available to everyone, and also a copy of the chat. So I hope you all have a lovely day, and thank you very much for joining us.
bye
Thank you,
everyone.
everyone.
I kind of don't want to say goodbye because everyone's so nice. And
Rachel's asked if that is me on the sidecar, and it is. I don't look any different, hopefully, Rachel. That is me. It was a windy journey.
So excellent. I'll just give everyone a little chance. I'm not very good at this ending right. I'm going to say goodbye. Have a good day, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.